Do you know what the axiom is?
The Axiom?
Yeah.
The great will of the universe, right?
Yes.
Which, as established in Apocalypse, no?
Kinda. Allow me to explain.
I think it's touched upon in Nocturne as well.
Okay, so this is more commonly referred to as the Great Will, and many people seem to believe that the Great Will is God, like Yuzubu, right?
Yeah,
Because
but the Axiom is the step above God.
Yeah. So basically, it's been referred to as the Great Will more in the past, and the Axiom in Apocalypse.
What does Axiom even mean?
Let's look it up.
Good idea, actually.
I'm sure it has a cool meaning.
And before, it means like just the pinnacle. Axiom means a statement
or self-evident truth that requires no proof.
Yeah.
So a statement like "you suck" is an axiom.
Oh, fuck you.
There's no point in arguing with it. It's like a horse is a horse, of course.
I got a good axiom for you. Fither's a gay virgin.
Well, one of those is an axiom. So the axiom and the Great Will are basically the same thing, but it was referred more to as the Great Will in past games. Like people be like, "Oh, the Great Will says da da da," and a lot of the time people think the Great Will is God just because that sounds like a godly sort of thing. Like, "Oh, the Great Will, it must be God."
It's basically the superintendent.
Right. But the Great Will is a being that's higher than God, right?
Higher than YHVH, Brahman,
right.
Kagetsuchi, etc.
So, basically you can think about it like this. God is a fourth-dimensional entity, which means that in the same way we can move through three-dimensional space, God is, like, omnipresent. And being omnipresent and omnipotent are not the thing. God in S&T is not an omnipotent thing, right?
Right.
So, he is able to move through time in the same way that we three-dimensional beings can move through space. Right. And that's why he's all present everywhere, and that's why there's multiple different timelines and dimensions.
Mm-hmm.
The Axiom is a fifth-dimensional being, and it's hard enough to explain what the fourth dimension is, but the fifth dimension is, like, beyond the concept of time, right? Like, God, for example, is bound to particular timelines. Like, if you kill God in... Let's say that we're in timeline A. God is present throughout timelines A through Z, right?
Right.
You can kill him in A, and since he is kind of centralized in A, he disappears throughout all of them. A fifth-dimensional being supplants himself across all of time, and there's no way to eliminate him from that time, right?
Right.
In the same way that there's no way to get rid of time without destroying all of creation. You have to in order to defeat a fifth-dimensional being, you would have to destroy all of creation on top of creation.
Delete universe.
Right. Well, it's more than just universe deletion. It's more, yeah.
The white end, yeah.
Essentially, yes. But I don't think that would wipe out all timelines. That would just wipe out...
The light still exists, but...
Right.
Yeah.
That would just wipe out that one particular timeline, and probably wouldn't kill God.
Yeah,
So, the Axiom is... The Axiom can't stand God and thinks he's a fucking prick, right?
Yeah,
I should explain what the Axiom is, because I've explained kind of what constitutes the Axiom.
I remember
Axiom...
Steven heavily implying in his DLC boss fight that the Axiom really thinks YHVH is kind of a douche.
Yeah, I'll talk about Steven in a second. But the Axiom isn't a physical entity in the same way that God is, right? The Axiom is more a thought form. Like, in the typical, like, Judeo-Christian, most religions kind of have this image of God as as a thing that's not physical, but can make himself physical. The Axiom is the same way, except has no latent ability to turn himself into something that exists. Just because it's so much higher, it would be like me saying to you, Ed, turn into a one-dimensional being for me, right?
What?
Exactly. The Axiom is on a scale that's so grand, there's no conceivable way to fuck with things that are dimensions below it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, like, the Axiom is just a big thought form. Like, it's the collective will of humanity, and, like, demons originate kind of from the Axiom. Like, in one of the endings of Apocalypse, Dagda says that he's going to return to his form as, like, Demons are just energy and thought that are put into physical shells that we...
By YHVH, I think?
No, by us, by humans. Because the reason why is because we spend so much time thinking and praying to gods that's the form that in the Axiom they just kind of take the shape of, because we're thinking about them, right?
Right.
What was I saying?
Oh god.
No, so the Axiom, like, demons get their form from the Axiom, right? And from the will of humans, and they kind of supplant themselves from, like, hell, basically. It's not really hell, but it's another dimension. Basically, the Axiom is a thought form created by humans. Well, not really created by humans. The Axiom just kind of exists. And the Axiom is the non-physical aspect of the universe.
It is existence.
Right, it is existence. And God exists. God is essentially the most powerful demon, because God is a thought form created by us in the typical image of God, right? That's the reason why he's so powerful, is because the majority of the world believes in this idea of a singular God being, as opposed to the more old way of thinking where it's like multiple gods that all preside over a particular aspect of existence, right?
See Hindu mythology, where they create like 3 new gods every month.
Mm-hmm. So, God is an extremely centralized source of power because of this, and that's why whenever God is quote-unquote killed, he's only dead for a little bit, because inevitably humanity will once again believe in something that will bring order, and something that will kind of, like, that is a god to believe in. Kind of like Yaldabaoth in Persona 5. He's just a big shadow amalgamation of people's desire to be controlled.
Right.
And God is kind of the same way in SMT.
Mm.
So the Axiom can't stand God and thinks he's the biggest fucking prick that you can imagine, because he's oppressing what's theoretically supposed to be its universe in a way that he really doesn't like. And God stretches beyond multiple timelines, right? Mm. Like, a character like the Demi-Fiend, for example, true demon ending might be different, but he's restricted to the same timeline or dimension.
The true demon ending is basically you beat Lucifer in a spar match. It's like, yo, you're pretty cool, kid. Be my lieutenant. Let's go kick the shit out of God, right. And then you lose off camera.
Exactly. It's pretty heavily suggested that the Demi-Fiend does not succeed in his mission. Basically, the Axiom thinks God is a prick, because not only is he an asshole, but he's an asshole that's so powerful, he's fourth dimensional, right? He spreads himself across multiple timelines and dimensions and exists in, like, all over. So this is what the Axiom does. The Axiom cannot act on its own because, in a way, God is, like, low-key inaccessible to it, because it cannot take a physical form. It can't really interact in a three-dimensional way the way a human can.
So it has Steven, who is basically ascended. The only ascended human.
Kind of. I'll get into Steven. But what it generally does is it will create messiahs, right? And messiahs are generated from the Axiom, kinda. It's kind of like, you know how in Star Wars, like, Darth Vader, Anakin Skywalker was just kind of created from the Force? Mm. The messiahs are a similar way. Most S&T protagonists are a messiah. They're messiahs. And they don't really know it. They're just kind of born, and their destiny is to engage in the conflict of law and chaos, but not necessarily... And they don't always succeed, right?
Right.
Only been four of these messiahs have worked, right? The guy from Megami Tensei 2, SMT2 guy, and Flynn and Nanashi both kind of did that.
Right, in their own respective ends.
Flynn's kind of on the fence, though, because he's like, you know... The Axiom creates these messiahs with the hope that they will defeat God. Now, this is my lead-in into Schrodinger. I think that Schrodinger is a weapon, like, not really a weapon, but an agent of the Axiom. Because Schrodinger knows too much about the situation that he logically has no reason to know anything about. And he's a cat, also.
Uh-huh.
And, like, how did he end up in the digital karma world, or whatever you want to call it?
He kind of just is.
Right. He's kind of just there.
And I see where you're going with this.
This is the part that has me convinced, is that Schrodinger knows things about stuff that probably happened in another, like, reality. Which doesn't...
Like where he talks about, let's go observe other realities towards the end.
Yes. So, one theory that I see is that Schrodinger works for, like, actually God, and this is a pretty plausible theory, is the idea that Brahman is, like, a fake god, right? Like, sometimes those will show up in SMT, or, like, gods that are fake, like Kagetsuchi is like that.
Like, there's Kagetsuchi, there's the Demiurge in Strange
Right.
Journey, there's fucking, what was it? I just off the tip of my tongue. Oh, right, the fucking fake YHVH you fight in SMT2.
Mm-hmm. So there will be, like, fakes, right?
Right.
And one theory is that Brahman is basically like a fake god, but I don't know if that's necessarily true. What I think Brahman is I think that Brahman is a god-esque manifestation of, like, the core god that is similar to Kagetsuchi. Like, all Kagetsuchi is an aspect of creation and God that was summoned by, what was that guy's name? Hiwari?
Hijiri?
Hijiri.
No, wait, no. Hijiri was the...
Hijiri's the long-haired guy, right?
Yeah, with the hat that fucking died.
Yeah, whoever the guy was that had,
the guy with the guy that basically looks like old Flynn without a ponytail.
Yes, that guy. He summoned this aspect of creation, Kagetsuchi. And a whole big part of the scheme that Lucifer has is to kill Kagetsuchi. Because Kagetsuchi is, for all intents and purposes, just an aspect of God that has created this world, right?
Right.
So that's step one, is he wants to cut off Kagetsuchi, turn the world into darkness, so that there's no more of the cycle of God's creation, and then they're going to go declare war on real God, right? And so I think it's a similar situation in Digital Devil Saga, where Brahman is kind of just implanted there by God, or he's like an aspect of God, who, for whatever reason, wants to suck up the earth into the sun.
Right. Because it goes into the whole conversation of data, which just went right over my head.
Mm-hmm. Right, because all he's doing is he's sucking up data. Why he's doing that is up to your interpretation. Maybe God is like, I'm sick of humanity, let's try again. Or, who knows, it's up to you, what purpose that served. Schrodinger's job is to find and aid whoever the Messiah may be. Now, you can think either Surf is the Messiah, Sarah's the Messiah, they might both be the Messiah, or Seraph could just be the Messiah.
You could argue that Surf and Sarah are intrinsically connected to be, like, the same being.
Yeah.
Because they both share the water crown. Yeah.
God typically does not do that, where he'll create two Messiahs at any given point. He did that in SMT4 Apocalypse with Flynn and what's his face?
Nanishi.
Yeah, that's what I think, is Schrodinger works for the Axiom in some way, shape, or form. Because he can do that, is he can create things that are third-dimensional, but not necessarily directly influence what happens there. Because he's just it's so far above it, that it's like, there's no way to fuck with it. And so that's what my belief is that Schrodinger was created by the Axiom in order to guide the Messiah in a way that will stop this aspect of God that's devouring the earth. I guess we can talk about Steven. Steven's not really important in the grand scheme of this, but Steven, as far as we know, is the only...
Steven isn't really important in relation to Shin Megami Tensei 3 and Digital Devil Saga.
But Steven is like the only person that we know of that has made contact with the Axiom. What that consists of, I guess, is beyond me. How do you talk to a fifth dimensional entity? But he's figured.
I think his exact explanation in Apocalypse is like, yeah, you wouldn't get it. Shut up.
Yeah, you wouldn't get it. It's so far above like our understanding that it's completely
beyond. Like, it's beyond what Digital Devil would call nirvana or even enlightenment. Like, he's beyond.
Right, because he's talked to that guy. So the argument that could be made is that the reason why Steven doesn't go and just mollywop fuck God is because he is also, like, a fifth dimensional being. And that, because...
Yeah, he's ascended that far.
Right. Yeah, Steven is the same guy in SMT 1 and in 2, because he's in those games, in 4 and in 4 Apocalypse. Because he's
the same guy. With infinite knowledge. Like, he's achieved infinite knowledge at this point.
Right, because he's a dimension and timeline hopper. So I think that he kind of works in the same way as Schrodinger or the Axiom do, where he can't necessarily get into a fight with God, but he can sure as hell help other people figure it out. Like, Steven is the guy who invents the demon summoning program in 1.
Right.
How the hell did he figure that out?
I guess he was just a super genius.
Right, because he's so smart, he just figured it out. Like, I don't know if it's ever really explained if he talked to the Axiom or the Great Will before or after he figured out the demon summoning program.
From what the gist I got on the wiki is he kind of just solved it.
He kind of just figured it out. So, what probably happened is he's, like, this really smart dude. He figures out this way to move matter between dimensions, and then through that he figures out how to speak to an entity 2 steps beyond what he is.
So, in other words, he's just fucking smart.
Yeah. Well, he's more than just smart. He's got, like, knowledge. He has an understanding that is beyond human.
So what you're going for is Schrodinger is the Steven of Digital Devil Saga.
Basically. That's what I'm trying to say, is that Steven he has a similar role. He kind of guides the main characters. Like, I bet you everything that if Schrodinger really wanted to, he could fucking obliterate Brahmin in ways that would just eviscerate him completely, but he can't.
Yeah, because someone else, Steven is just like beaming with energy.
Steven in that boss battle fights with singularities. Well, a mathematical singularity is a point at which a given mathematical object is not defined or well behaved. For example, something that is infinite. So essentially, he's hitting you with an infinity.
Right,
and
so
you're fine with
to the point where he just has control over matter and existence.
I mean, that's about the end of the theory, unless you had more questions.